It all started 30 years ago, when the sky simply ripped open and hordes of otherworldly monsters invaded Earth in an event people called the Rush. To fight back against the creatures, humanity awakened special combat classes, managing to repel the threat, but a new social divide ended up rising because of it. A massive barrier formed between those with magic classes and physical combat warriors, making the mages the new rulers of the world. Meanwhile, anyone with a class that couldn't use magic started being treated like absolute garbage by society. But in the middle of all this injustice, there's still someone who refuses to just take this destiny. Sitting down, young Tatsuma Emori believes from the bottom of his heart that the era of swords will shine bright once again. He reveals that he was sent from Earth straight into this new world, and now he works as an adventurer about to go through the class awakening ritual. It all started 3 years ago, when he was taken in by a kind commoner couple on a night with a severe storm. Even though they were extremely poor and struggled to get by, they raised the boy with all the care and love in the world. One day, his adoptive father hands him a very simple sword, apologizing for not having the money to give him something better. The man tries to comfort him, saying that he and his mother will work even harder from now on to save up some coins. He promises that one day they will buy real magical gear and make sure the young man gets into the absolute best warrior academy out there. The father puts a hand on his shoulder and says that even though he's the son of commoners, he knows the boy carries a fiery soul full of grit inside him. He encourages the young man to train with everything he's got to prove his worth and become the strongest warrior of all. Tatsuma reflects that, even though the world has changed a lot, the selfish and prejudiced nature of people remained exactly the same, with nobles believing that power only comes from noble blood. He knows very well that the strong use their high and mighty titles to step on the weak, but he believes that blue blood alone will never give true power to anyone. Looking at that old, worn-out, and honestly ugly sword he got from his family, he feels something different. The moment his father put that simple weapon in his hands, the boy realized something very important about himself. He understood that the determination to overcome any humiliation creates an unshakable flame in the soul that is way more powerful than magic itself. Looking at his adoptive parents with affection, Tatsuma sincerely says that he never once blamed them for anything in his life. He grips the weapon tightly and claims that this single sword is more than enough for him to reach the top of the world. With a confident smile, he says they've already given him the most precious gift of all, so he doesn't need anything else to win. Feeling completely backed up by his family, the young man says goodbye, knowing he has everything he needs to start his journey as a warrior. He silently vows to himself that he will push his limits to the absolute maximum, so his parents never have to go through any hardships again. With that promise carved into his chest, he walks off determined to transform into the strongest warrior of all time. Back to the present, the head proctor calls the next candidate in line over the microphone, announcing Tatsuma's name before the entire crowd. The people around start whispering excitedly, commenting that he's the best student in the entire school, both in theory and practice, making him the big hope for the commoners. Everyone is impressed, remembering that he aced every single combat exam, even though he's just a rookie with no set class yet, scoring a perfect top grade in swordsmanship. However, a group of arrogant nobles starts mocking him, saying that being good with a sword means absolutely nothing if his magic talent is weak. They laugh and comment that the class he'll awaken depends on magic aptitude, and someone who only knows how to swing a sword is bound to get a totally useless class. One of the nobles yells loudly for the commoners to back off, arrogantly claiming that trash like them shouldn't be standing anywhere near nobility. He keeps mocking him, saying that swords are a thing of the past, and that anyone who insists on using that kind of weapon is doomed to stay in the gutter forever. Another rich kid wearing sunglasses walks up with his crew and laughs, commenting that even if by some miracle the boy got a decent class, it would just be a fleeting dream for commoners. He scoffs coldly, saying that a commoner will always be a commoner, and that they should just stop daydreaming. Brushing off the nasty comments echoing through the courtyard, Tatsuma walks with firm steps toward the massive summoning altar. He calmly extends his finger and taps the glowing panel to kick off his class awakening process. In that exact instant, a gigantic pillar of energy shines brilliantly across the courtyard, causing all the students to fall dead silent as they watch the light. But to everyone's absolute surprise, the magic screen reveals that the class he awakened is just a D-rank swordsman, the lowest possible tier. Seeing the result on the screen, the commoners in the crowd are devastated and start whispering that turning their lives around is truly impossible for them. One of the students yells out in despair, questioning if they really are doomed to suffer at rock bottom forever, despite training so incredibly hard. The nobles burst out laughing at the situation, mocking Tatsuma for thinking he was special when he was actually rejected by the system itself. The young man looks at the message on the screen showing he got the absolute worst class on the awakening list, but he keeps his cool in front of the whispering crowd. Far from being sad or shaken, he lets out a smirk, thinking that he actually planned on using the sword from the very start anyway. He calmly turns around with his hands in his pockets, showing he doesn't care in the slightest about being stuck with a supposedly weak D-rank class. For Tatsuma, this low-tier result is just the perfect starting point to show what he's truly capable of. The head instructor takes the mic and announces that, now that everyone has finished awakening, the practical survival test is about to begin to decide who gets into Dragon God University. Hearing this, some nobles whisper among themselves, saying they're not worried at all, as long as they don't come in dead last on the practical test. They look mockingly at Tatsuma and state with absolute certainty that he will be the worst of them all. Since he's the only commoner participating in this year's competition, the instructor announces he's going to start handing out the starter combat gear and asks everyone to step forward when their name is called. A high-class girl steps up to receive her items, and the crowd goes wild, commenting that she has exceptional magic talent and managed to awaken the powerful cherub archer class. The crowd buzzes, saying Makasawa is a genuine triple S rank prodigy. Considered a true chosen one in this world, she receives an elven bow with top-tier ice attributes, and the instructor allows her to take it as her starter equipment. Next, the instructor calls the next person in line, who happens to be the commoner, Tatsuma Emori. Tatsuma asks to choose a sword, but the instructor warns him that, with a D-tier swordsman class, he can only pick items from the lowest-ranked physical zone. The instructor hands him a rusty sword that had been locked away for years, mocking him to try and not break it and throw it away later, since it's nothing but junk. The other candidates start laughing, commenting that even if it came from a dungeon, that sword without any magic reinforcement is just a useless piece of scrap metal. A muscular guy shows off his master-class electric hammer, bragging that it fires 10,000 volts and paralyzes any enemy, mocking anyone who uses a blade with no attributes. Tatsuma ignores the bait and analyzes the rusty sword, noticing that despite the rust, its balance is excellent for fighting. He reflects that the divine and magical weapons used by the nobles seem to come from another world, while commoners at rock bottom have to make do with way less. He reminds himself that, with enough creativity and grit, even a regular piece of wood can be wielded like the most powerful weapon in existence. The instructor begins explaining the rules, pointing toward the Whispering Forest, a place crawling with creatures corrupted by otherworldly energy. He calms the students down, saying they are all low-level creatures, ranging at most between level 1 and level 2. The man guarantees that if everyone knows how to play to the strengths of their respective classes, no one will be in any real danger out there. He also lets them know that, to ensure everyone's safety, students have total freedom to form squads during the practical test. The instructor explains that if they form squads, points will be split based on each member's contribution, which will determine the final leaderboard. Watching Tatsuma walk away, some guys taunt him, asking if he's going to try and sneak off on his own so he doesn't embarrass himself in front of everyone. They laugh, saying that the truth is nobody wanted to team up with him, since it's a safe bet he's going to get the lowest score on the evaluation. The young prodigy Makasawa approaches Tatsuma and asks if he's really going to take the test completely solo. He confirms, saying he prefers to go solo and that nobody would squad up with him anyway, making the girl realize he's a lone wolf who likes taking risks just like her. Hearing the comparison, Tatsuma gives a highly enigmatic smirk as he continues on his way. The girl just watches him from afar, knowing that their paths are bound to cross sooner or later on the battlefield. With a confident nod, Tatsuma says goodbye, telling her he'll see her right in the hunting grounds. He walks away, knowing the nobles use all their money and influence to get magic gear that makes even amateurs look strong in no time. Meanwhile, all he has at his disposal is that worn-out, rusty blade he got from the instructor. Pulling up the system interface, the stats confirm that the weapon has only one attack point and a 1% chance of breaking with every single strike he lands. Makusawa keeps watching the boy from a distance, intrigued and not understanding where all that confidence comes from for him to head into the forest alone with such a weak weapon. She wonders if this over-the-top confidence is because of the perfect score he got in swordsmanship, a skill considered extremely hard to master and not very useful to her. Pure physical damage, warriors simply stand zero chance of survival in a world dominated by magic. She figures Tatsuma must be just another underdog desperately trying to turn his life around. Tatsuma steps into the magic rift, knowing full well that this is exactly the kind of judgment everyone makes when they look at him. He crosses the portal determined to prove that true strength comes from conviction, not titles, vowing to restore the honor of swordsmen. In another part of the forest, the narrative explains that magic weapons are enhanced items whose circuits are activated by mana power. Unlike the regular iron swords of the commoners, these weapons create a special energy field right around the blade. With just a single swing, the user can unleash destructive spells without needing any technique at all, making it a literal shortcut bought with cash. One of the noble candidates charges forward, yelling, his powerful thunderhammer glowing intensely. He easily smashes several level 2 wolves, laughing at how weak the creatures were for trying to attack him. He brags to his squad mates, showing off how ridiculously powerful his custom weapon is. His partners are blown away and comment that, with gear that expensive, he could defeat all the monsters in this starter dungeon completely solo without any trouble. The proud young man reveals that the B-rank weapon was custom-made by a national-level blacksmith, capable of taking down even level 3 creatures with a single strike. His teammate laughs confidently, stating that they are by far the strongest squad out there, and that the top spots on the leaderboard are already locked down. Suddenly, while they were talking, a strange noise makes one of the squad members lose his balance and fall from shock. The fallen guy gets up startled in the middle of the bushes, not understanding what just happened nearby. When he takes a proper look at the clearing ahead of them, he is completely shocked, his eyes wide open at what he sees. A massive pile of defeated wolf bodies is stacked up in the middle of the forest in a mind-blowing scene. The mage of the squad shakes with fear, saying it's absolute madness for someone to have cleared out so many creatures in such a short amount of time. The other warrior looks around confused, commenting that they didn't run into any insanely strong squads along the way. Intrigued, the mage decides to cast a magic detection spell to try and find out the identity of whoever was responsible for that sweep. He gets confused upon realizing there isn't a single trace of mana in the area, indicating a purely physical battle, something that should be impossible this deep in the forest. Right then, Tatsuma emerges from the shadows with his sword in hand, coldly ordering them to back away from his prey and find somewhere else to hunt. Seeing that the person responsible for all that is just the commoner boy everyone looked down on, the noble with the hammer starts laughing loudly and mockingly. The arrogant kid in armor yells out in outrage, saying it's impossible for Tatsuma to have cleared hundreds of wolves with that useless iron sword, since pure physical attacks shouldn't even pierce their defense. Facing the noble's temper tantrum, Tatsuma just stares back at him with a calm and completely bored look. The other warrior in the squad accuses the Prota of lying, claiming that this pile of monsters was clearly taken down by some powerful mage, and he just got lucky enough to walk by afterward. The squad's mage analyzes the creature's wounds and points out that there are traces of wind magic in the cuts, identifying the spell as a level 4 wind cutter. He turns to Tatsuma sarcastically, asking if he really has the nerve to say he cast a wind spell using that rusty piece of junk with total composure. The Prota replies that it actually wasn't a magic wind spell at all. He calmly explains that he simply swung his sword so fast that the actual air pressure ended up slicing the monsters as a side effect. The noble with the hammer gets even more ticked off by the answer and yells, asking if he thinks they're idiots for making up that a sword strike could be fast enough to mimic wind magic. He screams furiously, saying it's impossible for a mere commoner swordsman to pull off such an absurd feat. Tatsuma gives an ironic smile and comments that this limitation is actually just what they consider to be the common sense of that world. While the noble grumbles, muttering that the guy is just trying to look cool, a massive black wolf suddenly leaps out right behind him. The long-haired warrior notices the danger just in time and screams in despair for his teammate to watch out. The giant monster charges fiercely with its jaws wide open, heading straight for the caught-off-guard warrior's head. But in the blink of an eye, an invisible slash lines through the air and slices the creature clean in half mid-leap. The wolf drops dead on the ground, completely sliced up, spilling dark blood everywhere right in front of them. The noble is frozen in absolute shock, breaking into a cold sweat as he realizes he didn't even see Tatsuma move his sword, as if the blade had appeared out of nowhere to take down the beast. Desperately trying to deny what he just witnessed, he thinks to himself that it was just pure luck and that the monster must have crashed into the blade by total accident. Meanwhile, Tatsuma recalls his adoptive father's teachings about how monsters developed an absurd physical resistance after the invasion event. Because of this natural defensive barrier, no matter how much physical classes attack, their system usually registers the damage as 0. and it was precisely because of this detail that people started ridiculing physical combat classes, treating them all like useless garbage. Except, the Proto reveals he has a unique passive talent called sword synchrony, which makes all his blade attacks completely ignore any enemy resistance or defensive buffs, always dealing true damage. He explains that every class awakening grants a random talent, and his passive basically negates the enemy's magic defenses to deal damage based purely on the laws of physics. With this broken ability, even a king-level monster with insane defenses can be taken down easily, because as long as it has a health bar, Tatsuma can take it out. Without paying any more attention to the shocked group of nobles, the Prota simply turns his back and walks off, saying he's going to continue on his way. But the warrior in armor refuses to be ignored and yells furiously for him to stop right where he is. He snobs, saying that even if Tatsuma took down the beasts, they aren't going to let him just leave after stealing all the points that should belong to their squad. The Prota stops and asks with disdain what exactly he means by this story of stealing points. The noble points his finger and tells him not to play dumb since the number of monsters in the forest is limited, and every kill of his lowers the chances for others to score. He adds maliciously that the guy is already doomed to come in dead last anyway, so racking up points won't make any difference for a commoner. Tatsuma just holds up his hand dismissively and calmly suggests the noble take a look at the leaderboard before talking nonsense, because he might be in for a surprise. The arrogant warrior keeps laughing, claiming that even if the Prota gets lucky and survives, the proctors will think he cheated and wipe his points to 0. He points his finger authoritatively and declares that the unshakable rule of this world is that commoners must know their place and always lose to nobility. The long-haired swordsman draws his dagger and comes up from behind Tatsuma, threateningly demanding he hand over all the points he got and quit the practical test right now. The squad's mage steps up with a victorious smile and reveals he used his magic to bind the Prota's limbs with invisible mana chains, mocking him for thinking he could fight with pure physical strength alone. The group positions themselves around Tatsuma in a cowardly way, confident that 3 armed nobles against just 1 defenseless commoner would be a guaranteed, easy victory. The squad leader mocks him, saying his only option is to surrender, but the Prota gives a confident smile and calmly replies that he'll pass on the offer. The warrior with the dagger pressed against Tatsuma's neck gets extremely ticked off by his audacity and asks if he's looking down on their squad. The noble raises his electric hammer threateningly, saying it's hard to control the weapon's power and that if he ends up taking the guy out by accident, everyone will just consider it an exam casualty. However, before any of them can even move, an ear-splitting and absolutely terrifying roar echoes through the entire forest, making the noble sweat from sheer panic. They instantly hit the panic button upon realizing that the pressure of that howl is absurdly higher than a regular wolf's, indicating the presence of an extremely powerful creature. In that exact moment, an urgent system alert pops up on everyone's screen, warning about an unknown elite monster and changing the rules to give 10,000 points and a legendary item to whoever defeats it. With a violent crash, a monstrous wolf-like creature lands right in front of the group of terrified students. Tatsuma watches the giant beast with total composure and ironically comments that all their useless shouting ended up drawing the elite monster right to them. The system panel reveals that the terrifying creature before them is the fearsome Wolf Lord, a level 5 elite monster. Despite the initial fear, the warrior in armor gets greedy seeing the beast's rank and starts smiling, thinking about the immense wealth they'll gain if they manage to take it down. He takes charge and quickly orders the teammate with the dagger to charge first to use freeze and slow the monster down, while he and the mage attack with everything right after the long-haired swordsman charges forward at high speed, activating his Ice Blade skill to land a precise hit on the creature. However, the Wolf Lord reacts with terrifying speed and strikes the boy with a violent blow before he can even touch it with his dagger. The impact of the beast's attack is so devastating that it throws the student far away with total ease, shattering his defensive gear in the process. The squad's mage drops to his knees in absolute panic, seeing his teammate get taken down in a single hit, realizing with terror that the danger level of this test went completely off the rails and that everyone's life is on the line. Seeing the imminent danger, Tatsuma yells at the mage to stop standing there frozen and instantly break the mana chains binding his movements, except the squad leader panics seeing that the monster didn't take a single scratch and yells at the mage for them to run out of there, using the Prota as live bait, getting a shaky nod of agreement in return. The cowardly warrior in armor starts the countdown to run, cruelly thinking that his fallen partner can just perish there too, since the more bait he has, the higher his own chances of survival. Without thinking twice, he bolts in full retreat through the forest, while the Wolf Lord focuses its attention on the rest of the group. But Tatsuma just flexes his wrists slightly, easily shattering the mage's mana chains through sheer physical strength. The mage panics, saying they need to run too now that their leader abandoned them, but the Prota thinks it's awesome to run into a strong enemy right in a rookie dungeon, seeing it as the perfect test to measure his true strength on his way to the top with determination. He takes a combat stance and decides he's going to put an end to that wolf threat once and for all. The young man launches himself forward with impressive speed, charging directly at the massive creature. Leaping into the air with his sword raised high, he plans to land a tester strike to gauge the opponent's physical resistance level. He hits the top of the Wolf Lord's head, but the impact creates a sharp, metallic clank that shows just how rigid the monster's body is. The beast reacts instantly with a violent claw swipe, sending the boy flying back through the air. Tatsuma manages to stick a firm landing on the ground, but notices with surprise that his strike dealt 0 damage due to the opponent's extremely tough hide. Infuriated by the attack, the elite monster lets out another terrifying roar that makes the ground shake. The beast locks its glowing red eyes on the Prota, showing it's about to attack with even more aggression. In the next second, the Wolf Lord charges with way more speed than before, catching Tatsuma off guard with its sudden burst. The Prota quickly raises his sword to block the devastating claw strike, feeling a crushing pressure that starts to crack the ground beneath his feet. He struggles to hold against the impact, impressed by the fact that even the most basic attacks from a level 5 monster can be this brutal. Looking closely at the rusty blade he's holding, he realizes with concern that the weapon has already hit its limit and is about to shatter into pieces. Meanwhile, the cowardly leader who had fled far away stops and looks back as he hears the crashes of the battle. His jaw drops as he sees from a distance that the commoner boy actually managed to block and hold his ground against a direct hit from the powerful Wolf Lord. In the clearing, the giant monster keeps pushing its claw with all its might against Tatsuma's sword, trying to crush him at all costs. The noble in armor watches the scene terrified, muttering to himself that going head-to-head with that beast using a simple weapon is pure madness and suicide. Except, right as the danger hits the maximum level, a latent battle instinct way superior to rational thought awakens in the Prota's mind. He remembers that it was exactly this absolute focus that allowed him to get a perfect score in swordsmanship, managing to maintain a flawless defense against the opponent's pressure. With total cool, Tatsuma begins to precisely slide his weapon along the enemy's strike to deflect the force of the impact. He smoothly dodges the fatal attack, using refined movement techniques to cheat death at the very last millisecond. The boy knows that the true pinnacle of the art of the sword lies precisely in this ability to stay calm under extreme pressure. He faces the beast head-on as his fighting spirit triggers the sword synchrony skill, causing him and the blade to enter resonance and gain a 100-fold power boost. With his body and sword wrapped in an overwhelming aura of energy, Tatsuma unleashes an extremely fast and devastating side slash against his opponent. The Wolf Lord's eyes go wide in complete shock as it realizes the absurd speed and strength of the boy's sudden counterattack. In one clean, ruthless slash, the terrible beast's muscular arm is completely severed and goes flying through the air drenched in blood. As the blood gushes, Tatsuma feels the incredible force of the magic synchrony propel his body, proving to be even more powerful than he had originally imagined. He flashes a confident smile in the heat of battle, knowing full well that losing is simply not an option on his journey. However, the pain of losing its arm makes the Wolf Lord let out a furious roar and instantly enter rage mode, its body enveloped by a dark energy. Even wounded, the creature leaps toward the Prota, unleashing a desperate swipe with its remaining claw. Tatsuma dodges the attack with extreme agility, maneuvering through the air to position himself perfectly for the next move. He hits the giant monster's jaw with a crushing uppercut punch that violently launches it upward. He notes that, even wounded and down a claw, the strength of the creature's physical strikes has increased considerably due to the rage state. Giving the Wolf Lord 0 time to recover in midair, the Prota propels himself to deliver the final blow and finish the fight for good. With a precise and extremely violent motion, he unleashes a vertical downward slash that hits the opponent dead on. The beast's massive body crashes heavily against the ground, ripping open a huge crater and skidding through the dirt right in front of the noble in armor, who watches everything, unable to believe his eyes. The squad leader tries to scramble up desperately, but his legs are shaking with pure terror as he realizes the commoner boy is staring at him from a distance after defeating the elite monster. Tatsuma calmly walks over and stops right next to the fallen noble, looking down on him with a gaze of complete contempt. With a cold, cutting voice, the Prota simply orders the boy to get out of his way immediately if he wants to stay alive. The warrior in armor scoots back, crawling along the ground consumed by fear, horror-stricken as he wonders if this terrifying guy is really that commoner, Tatsuma. He shakes from head to toe, feeling the overwhelming aura of the Prota, who now looks like a totally different person, resembling a true, ruthless demon. Tatsuma straight up ignores him and turns his back, walking with firm steps toward the Wolf Lord's body stretched out on the ground. He takes a massive leap into the air, positioning the tip of his worn-out sword downward to deliver the mercy blow to the helpless creature. With a swift and accurate motion, he drives the blade deep into the monster's head, ending the fight for good with a spray of dark blood. Tatsuma lands on his knees on top of the defeated elite beast's carcass, as silence finally returns to that area of the forest. After delivering the finishing blow, Tatsuma feels extreme exhaustion hit his body, realizing he pushed his limits way too far as his vision begins to blur. Driven by his burning fighting spirit, the young man broke through every physical barrier, but now that the effect of sword synchrony has faded, he can barely move. Suddenly, Tatsuma hears the crackle of electricity and notices Ven approaching, the cowardly leader in armor who had returned to the clearing. The noble walks up dragging his electric hammer and begrudgingly admits that Tatsuma really is a genius, recognizing that even a commoner from the gutter has a chance to change their own destiny. But flashing a wicked smile full of envy, he loudly declares that this is the end of the line for the Prota. The long-haired young man from the squad reappears, warning the leader that this cowardly sneak attack from behind could backfire if the guy decides to counterattack Tatsuma, ends up dropping to his knees, and starts coughing up blood from pure physical exhaustion, showing he truly has zero strength left to defend himself at that moment. The warrior in armor yells, saying that obviously he was afraid of dying, but mocks the Prota for playing the hero and handing his weak spot to them on a silver platter. He laughs out loud, pointing out that the boy can't even move, planning to finish him off right there to make the proctors think he was taken out by the elite beast consumed by madness and greed. The noble raises his thunder hammer with lightning crackling all around it, screaming that he will become number one and be recognized by all of society. Tatsuma remains motionless with his head down, leaning on his worn-out sword, as the electric hammer comes bringing down ruthlessly toward him. Except, snapping his eyes open with fierce determination, he vows to himself that he will never allow himself to be defeated by a cheap shot from a coward. Gathering every single drop of energy he has left, the Prota blocks the thunder hammer with his blade in a final effort that represents all the pride he carries for choosing the path of the sword. The warrior in armor flies into a rage seeing the boy resist and yells at him to stop fighting a losing battle against the inevitable. He puts even more weight into his roaring hammer, telling the Prota to just perish like the useless commoner trash he is. Suddenly, a purple slash of pure magic energy comes out of nowhere and cuts through the arrogant noble's body in a brutal fashion. Tatsuma gets a terrible chill and wonders what's going on as he sees the Wolf Lord, which seemed defeated, rise once again behind him, enveloped in a dark mist. A terrifying presence dominates the whole area as the sharp red eyes of the true predator gleam with a cold, terrifying light. With a monstrous crash, the giant wolf unleashes a crushing blow that violently sends the other students flying. Tatsuma realizes with horror that the beast has entered the blood frenzy state, an extreme condition triggered when the monster is near death, causing it to break past all its limits and unleash unparalleled destructive power. He understands that the cunning creature was just playing dead to make them drop their guard before delivering a treacherous counterattack. Despite the grim situation, Tatsuma notices that his physical exhaustion has passed, and that now is the ideal moment to strike back with everything he knows that, although the enemy's attack power skyrocketed, its defense plummeted, turning that extreme danger into his absolute best window for victory. The young man firmly plants himself on the ground and drives the tip of his rusty sword into the dirt, preparing to channel all his energy. He mentally declares that all his strength, his convictions, and his willpower will be channeled directly into his blade for this one last decisive strike. The Wolf Lord leaps fiercely with its jaws wide open to devour him in a swift, ruthless charge. Tatsuma stands perfectly still and focused on the trajectory of the giant beast coming his way. With a shout of determination, he triggers the sword synchrony skill once again to focus his entire fighting spirit into the final slash. In an incredibly fast and powerful circular motion, the Prota unleashes a devastating upward slash. With the beast finally sliced clean in half, a system alert pops up on the screen, confirming the Wolf Lord has been defeated and that he received 10,000 points for the feat. Meanwhile, outside the rift, the emergency broadcast system warns about an abnormal surge of monsters in the forest and confirms casualties among the noble students, requesting reinforcements from B-rank adventurers Tatsuma, exhausted and panting after the brutal clash. Looks up as he senses yet another presence approaching him in the clearing. He sees the archer Makusawa arriving at the scene and ironically comments that her reaction time couldn't have been better. The young prodigy stops in the middle of the trees and stares completely dumbfounded at the elite monster's body stretched out on the ground alongside the other students. Back at the main courtyard, the massive leaderboard reveals the final results of the entrance exam, showing Tatsuma in absolute first place with an absurd 10,300 points. The students in the courtyard hit total shock and start whispering, unable to understand if that Imori is actually the D-tier commoner swordsman. People shout in astonishment, pointing out that this score is 25 times higher than the prodigy Makusawa's, and that not even the highest graduation score from last year broke 300 points. The arrogant nobles start venting furiously, demanding the proctors check the system because they think it's a glitch, as it would be an immense embarrassment for the nobility if a mere commoner took first place. They start protesting in unison in front of the proctor's stage, accusing Tatsuma of cheating and demanding his score be cancelled immediately. The head proctor receives a confidential report through his magic communication orb and seriously replies that he understands the gravity of the situation. He clears his throat into the microphone and takes a solemn tone to announce to everyone that he has some extremely sad and tragic news regarding the exam. The man explains that a severe incident occurred in the central area of the forest where the monsters entered an uncontrollable frenzy state. He reveals that 2 noble students ended up passing away during the test, and another was slightly injured, sparking panic and cries of despair among the audience. The director goes on to inform them that the surviving student, Tatsuma Imori, was the one who defeated the fearsome level 5 Wolf Lord that caused the tragedy, justifying his massive score. Even hearing the official explanation, the wealthy crowd refuses to accept it, muttering with disdain that a mere D-rank swordsman probably just got the last hit on a monster that was already practically dead. While the nobles keep complaining and questioning if the points should even be valid, Tatsuma stays chilling. Calmly sitting on the campus grass, Makusawa approaches him with her arms crossed and asks with a serious look what actually went down inside the forest during the exam. With total indifference and modesty, the Prota just replies that he got lucky and that he was just swinging his sword until it hit the target at the right time. Except the girl reveals she personally went to investigate the battle site and didn't find a single trace of mana in the slashes left on the ground, proving the wounds were made by purely physical skills. She looks him dead in the eye and asks straight up if the fearsome Wolf Lord was indeed defeated solely and exclusively by him alone. Makusawa theorizes that the 3 nobles probably tried to steal the final kill on the monster or tried to sabotage Tatsuma, causing the frenzied beast to target them first. With a calm and uninterested look, Tatsuma just replies that that's nothing but a wild guess in her head. The girl asks if he isn't going to try and defend himself against the cheating accusations the nobles are throwing around, but he replies that doing so is completely pointless. The Prota explains that the elite has already decided what answer they want to hear, and that it's not worth wasting time arguing against their prejudice using words. He looks at his blade and reflects that even a rusty sword thrown in the trash can prove its true worth through the edge it still holds. He knows that, sooner or later, a warrior's true strength always speaks for itself on the battlefield. Tatsuma knows that, because he's just a commoner with a talent considered mediocre. Canceling his massive score to quiet down the nobles' outrage is the most rational move for the proctors. On the main stage, the instructor officially announces over the mic that the board of proctors has unanimously decided to void Tatsuma's score. Hearing the decision, the nobles in the crowd start applauding with mocking smiles, commenting that a reless commoner should know his place and never try to reach the top. The leaderboard goes through an immediate change, removing Tatsuma's 10,300 points and placing Makusawa in first place with 419 points. The director begins reading the official list of accepted students who earned the right to enter Dragon God University, starting with the first place finisher at 419 points. He keeps reading the names until he suddenly stops in surprise, noticing something weird as he sees that Tatsuma's name still shows up right on the acceptance cutoff line. The screen reveals that Tatsuma landed exactly in the 100th position with 0 points, managing to scrape by right on the edge of passing. The students in the courtyard start yelling in outrage, asking how someone can pass with 0 points and furiously questioning if this is yet another system error. The proctor analyzes the data on his magic panel and is intrigued to find that there is a massive number of candidates who finished the exam with negative scores. The panel of scientists and professors watches Tatsuma's rank at 100th place with 0 points, trying to understand what caused that bizarre situation. The screen explains that the exam rules severely penalize any attack or interference against allies with a loss of points, revealing a list of nobles who received negative scores for violating the regulations. Tatsuma calmly walks through campus, knowing that the 3 nobles who tried to end him and the other idiots who fought among themselves ended up wrecking their own scores with penalties. He reflects that, thanks to these mass disqualifications, the average score for passing plummeted straight down to 0, allowing him to get into college perfectly clean. With a light smirk, the Prota thinks that luck really was on his side this time, even if it was in a pretty unusual way. Suddenly, the arrogant noble who bothered him earlier yells Tatsuma's name, mocking him and saying that getting into that university won't change a commoner's life and that the place will be a literal living hell for him. The rich kid with the glasses and his female companion cross their arms and state smilingly that, without the backing of a big influential family, he won't last even a few months in there, far from being intimidated. Tatsuma gives a highly sarcastic smirk and replies that he's actually looking forward to seeing this supposed hell up close. He walks right past them with his head held high, confidently thinking that he can't wait to face all those arrogant nobles all over again inside the university. Sometime later, the scene cuts to the grand entrance of the massive Dragon God University campus. With several new students crossing the main gates, Tatsuma arrives at the location and notices that even the pins with the school emblem have 2 different versions to separate the students, when he's cut off by a shout heading his direction. He looks to the side and sees a commoner student being assaulted and humiliated by a group of arrogant nobles right near the entrance walls. The attackers mockingly point to a sign indicating a secondary entrance exclusive to commoners, asking why trash like him was trying to walk through the main gate, meant for nobility. The squad leader points to a regular run-down back door, arrogantly declaring that that falling-apart entrance is the only one commoners have the right to use. As the poor, injured commoner student starts to humiliate himself, crawling toward the secondary gate under the noble's laughter, Tatsuma appears and orders him to stop right there. The noble in the red shirt keeps sadistically demanding the commoner strip down and crawl on all fours to enter, claiming that his presence in those dirty clothes breaks the institution's dress code. He aggressively grabs the boy by the collar, stating that nobles and commoners live in completely different worlds and that they should be grateful for the reception they set up. Suddenly, a firm and ruthless hand tightly grips the attacking noble's arm, stopping the assault in that exact instant. The attacker turns around, surprised and extremely ticked off by the interruption, running right into Tatsuma's serious and intimidating gaze. He quickly recognizes the boy and comments in surprise that it's the D-tier swordsman who passed the exam, realizing their paths have crossed yet again. With total disdain, Tatsuma just shoves his arm away roughly and comments that he already figured which idiot would be causing trouble on the very first day. The noble snobs, saying he had already warned the boy during the entrance exam, but that he ended up enrolling anyway out of pure stubbornness. He points arrogantly once more to the rundown back gate, repeating that the correct registration procedure for a commoner is to get on their knees and wear a leash. He pokes the pin on the prota's chest with a mocking smile, claiming that Tatsuma won't be any exception to their humiliating rules. Ignoring the physical provocation, the prota declares with an intimidating look that any student who earned their spot through their own strength has every right to pass through the main gate. He points right back at the arrogant nobles and states that they are actually just clowns using expensive gear with 0 substance inside, and that falling apart gate suits them way better. The squad leader turns bright red with anger and yells furiously, asking how commoner trash has the audacity to talk back like that to a member of the nobility. He and his partner take combat stances, wickedly claiming that nobles have the legal right to discipline commoners using force, and that they won't face any punishment, even if they severely injure him right there. Tatsuma just watches their movements with utter boredom, commenting that it was only to be expected to see power-tripping nobles trying to flex on the very first day of class. He lets out a sigh of disdain and calls them pathetic, stating that they only bully the weak to try and prop up their extremely fragile egos. Pointing his index finger firmly, the young man tops it off by saying that the instant these nobles lose the protection of their rich families, they won't be anything more than creatures inferior to humans themselves. The attacker in the red shirt gnashes his teeth, enraged, and tightly clenches his fists, declaring that the guy seems to have a massive death wish today. Without showing a single bit of fear, Tatsuma challenges both attackers to stop hesitating and just charge together at once, promising to show them the simplest way to learn their lesson through combat. He takes a step forward with calm strides, promising to pay back twofold all the suffering they caused others and all the pain they tried to impose on him. The prota's gaze becomes incredibly sharp and threatening, making it crystal clear to his opponents that they just started a fight with the absolute wrong person. Tatsuma glares at the attacker and warns him with total chill that he's going to return every single piece of humiliation they caused 100 times worse. The noble in the red shirt completely loses his cool and charges forward, his fist crackling with electricity, screaming that he's going to beat the prota to death. But the prota dodges the punch with extreme ease and fluidity, merely shifting his body to the side at the exact perfect moment. Without wasting a single second, Tatsuma delivers a devastating right hook straight to the attacker's face, breaking his nose instantly. The force of the impact is so brutal that the arrogant noble is launched backward at high speed, leaving a trail of blood in the air. He goes spinning wildly across the university's entrance courtyard after taking that single crushing blow. The attacker's trajectory ends with a violent crash as he collides directly against the institution's brick wall. The guy collapses unconscious on the ground upside down, his eyes rolled back and foaming at the mouth while his body twitches. Tatsuma turns with a cold and intimidating look toward the other noble in the group, who begins to shake and break into a cold sweat from sheer panic, facing such a display of raw strength. The other students watching the scene unfold around them are completely stunned, unable to comprehend how a noble lord was sent flying into the air. With such utter ease, they start whispering terrified as they realize that a mere D-tier commoner swordsman defeated a powerful noble with a single regular punch, without even needing to draw his sword. Leaving everyone in absolute silence and in a state of total shock, the prota simply continues on his way with his hands in his pockets. He calmly crosses the main gate of the university without anyone daring to try and stop him again. Seeing the boy's courageous move, the other commoner students who were there start clapping in a timid and admiring way. Right after, the applause turns into shouts of celebration and cheers, celebrating that spectacular punch that vindicated all of them. Ignoring the commotion and the loud cheering from the crowd, Tatsuma just keeps moving forward into the campus interior. He thinks to himself that he didn't intend to draw so much attention on day one, but admits it was highly satisfying to put those arrogant pricks right in their place. Sometime later, the young man opens the door to his new dorm room to settle in. He is greeted with a massive smile by his roommate, a robust guy named Tsuyoshi Matsuoka, who quickly introduces himself by his nickname, Bucho. The prota returns the greeting and formally introduces himself as Tatsuma Emori. While the two exchange a friendly handshake, Bucho comments excitedly that even though this university is a literal living hell for commoners because of the arrogant nobles, now they have a major hero. Asking if he heard about the fight that went down at the main gate earlier, Tatsuma lets out a sigh and gives an awkward smile as he realizes his roommate is talking precisely about him, without having the slightest clue about the hero's identity. The roommate keeps hyping up the gossip in a highly exaggerated way, with lots of hand gestures, claiming that the mysterious warrior broke Lord Canberra's neck with a single devastating punch. He laughs, remembering that the nobles who witnessed the scene turned completely pale from fear, while Tatsuma calmly comments that he's exaggerating the details of the story a bit. Thinking to himself about what happened, the prota reflects that it really only took one simple punch to end the fight because the opponent was way weaker than he had imagined. Bucho proudly declares that the mysterious fighter is the perfect hero to inspire all the commoners in the college and vows that starting today, he's going to train to be exactly like him. He raises his clenched fists with determination, promising that in the future, he will also be strong enough to take down villains and protect helpless people. Bucho friendly reveals that he has the B-rank paladin class and asks his roommate what his level is, receiving the honest answer that he's a D-rank swordsman. The guy is completely shocked, his eyes wide open upon hearing that, commenting in an impressed tone that Tatsuma must have worked his tail off to manage to get into the university with such a low-tier class. Acting like a true man of principles, Bucho puts a hand on the prota's shoulder and tells him not to worry, promising to protect him from any bully who tries to mess with him from then on. Tatsuma just lets out a genuine laugh and thinks to himself that he always preferred to train and fight solo, finding it pretty weird and funny to be around someone this friendly. He decides to keep his true strength a secret to avoid drama in his academic routine, preferring to silently pave his way to the top while letting his roommate stick with that misunderstanding. In a luxurious mansion, the butler of an influential family talks with a young noble lying in a hospital bed, informing him that the head of the family ordered him to handle that problematic situation on his own. The bedridden young man, who is none other than Kanbara with his neck immobilized by a cervical collar, screams furiously, telling the butler to shut up while cursing Tatsuma's name with deep hatred. He demands with clenched teeth that, within a week, the servant use every dirty trick and scheme possible inside the university to completely break the prota. The butler coldly adjusts his glasses and replies that he will fulfill the young master's wish, promising to ensure Tatsuma is removed from the institution through a supposed fatal accident. The magic rift closes abruptly, while a threatening red aura wraps around the mind of the noble plotting his revenge. The injured noble screams insanely that he wants to make sure he personally watches every single second of the commoner swordsman's slow suffering and demise. The next day, the story moves forward to the Grand Practical Combat Training Gym of Dragon God University. Where the new students gather, Bucho worriedly advises Tatsuma to keep his head down and not draw attention, commenting that the professor in charge of that practical discipline has a reputation for loving to hunt down commoner students. A tall man with long hair and yellow glasses enters the gym with an imposing stance, identified as Benjamin Lee, the university's practical instructor. He stands in the center of the stage and coldly declares to the rookies that his class focuses solely on practical results and that weak warriors are not worthy of receiving his teachings. The professor walks around, staring directly into the crowd of students, and spots Tatsuma right in the middle of the crowd, confirming to himself that that's the boy they talked about. In a quick flashback to his office, Benjamin Lee is seen talking on the phone, agreeing that expelling the young commoner would be way too light of a punishment for what he did. He cruelly promises over the phone that he will return tenfold the wounds caused to Lord Kanbara and that the commoner will pay with his own life for daring to forget his proper place. Back in the gym, the instructor loudly declares before everyone that, according to the roll call, there is a D-tier insect right in their midst who doesn't know his own place in the hierarchy. The other noble students start laughing and whispering mockingly, wondering who the unfortunate owner of such an insignificant class could be to draw the professor's attention. Bucho looks at Tatsuma with a startled expression, breaking into a cold sweat, asking if the professor is referring specifically to him. Pointing his finger aggressively straight at the prota, Instructor Benjamin yells Tatsuma's name and declares that the mere presence of a D-tier commoner there is an insult to his class, ordering him to drop out of the course at that exact moment. Keeping his stance firm and showing zero fear in front of the professor's pressure, Tatsuma stares right back at him and proudly states that even though he's a commoner, he earned his spot at that university using his own strength. Tatsuma confesses he's pretty curious to see how this results-based practical system the professor mentioned actually works, while thinking about the two main paths for someone to get stronger in that world. The first of these paths is leveling up, which makes anyone's stats increase equally, regardless of their social class. Meanwhile, the second path involves the stat bonuses granted by the class rank itself, meaning anyone born with a high rank class already starts with a massive advantage that only grows with every level. Because of this, the majority of the resources are funneled straight to the nobles with high rank classes, making the strong get even stronger and leaving commoners with zero chance of making it in life. Except Tatsuma knows very well that, in reality, level and class rank don't define absolutely everything. He knows there is a fundamental third factor, which is combat technique. This being the one and only true advantage left for the commoners, Benjamin Lee mocks the boy, saying that a commoner's mind could never comprehend the generosity of the nobles, making it clear that disobeying in his class can literally cost someone their life, which only makes Tatsuma even more interested in the situation. The prota then challenges the instructor with a smile on his face, asking him to just show right now how this famous results-based class works in practice. The professor flies into an absolute rage at the audacity and yells, telling the young man to watch his mouth when speaking to his superior. With a sadistic smile and adjusting his glasses, Benjamin Lee says he'll give the kid a shot and decides that, since the training dummy is broken today, Tatsuma will serve as the class punching bag. The other noble students love the idea of being able to beat up a commoner on day 1 of class and start celebrating the instructor's cruel decision. Bucho panics and grabs Tatsuma's arm, begging him not to take the bait, to apologize immediately, and to make up that he's feeling sick so he can just get out of there. Tatsuma calms his friend down, saying he can't stand that professor either, but agrees with the idea that commoners need to claim their rights by showing their own strength. He flashes a confident smile and comments that even if the worst happens, that's still way better than just lying down and accepting defeat without a fight. Hearing those words full of grit, Bucho is completely left speechless and just watches his roommate. Without hesitating for a single second, Tatsuma begins walking up the steps toward the center of the training gym. The professor watches the boy approach and thinks to himself that if the young man ends up perishing right there, it will save him a lot of trouble in eliminating him. Benjamin Lee orders Tatsuma to fight completely unarmed, dismissively claiming that a swordsman who doesn't have a sword in hand is nothing but trash. The prota simply drives his old, rusty sword into the ground and replies that that's great, because he didn't want to run the risk of dirtying his weapon on these people anyway. Several noble students start shouting and raising their arms with enthusiasm, begging the professor to be chosen to give the boy a beating. With a cold look, the instructor adjusts his glasses and picks 3 of them all at once, ordering them to attack together with no mercy. The crowd is shocked to see that Tatsuma will have to face 3 opponents completely weaponless, while some nobles coldly whisper that nobody cares if a commoner perishes there. Benjamin Lee flashes a wicked smile and states that reality is unfair, especially for commoners who don't know how to recognize their proper place in society. Bucho watches all that injustice happen right before his eyes and breaks into a cold sweat from pure worry. For his friend Tatsuma calmly positions himself in the middle of the large combat arena and thinks that his own bare hands will be more than enough to deal with those 3 weaklings. Suddenly, Bucho raises his hand in the middle of the crowd and yells to the professor, letting him know that he wants in on that fight too. The instructor gives a mocking laugh, believing the big guy wants to join the others to beat on his fellow commoner roommate and get ahead by stepping on his own kind. To everyone's surprise, and especially Tatsuma's, Bucho walks up to the arena and firmly declares that he's entering the fight as the prota's ally. Benjamin Lee just lets out a dismissive laugh and comments that it's only natural to see trash teaming up with trash. While the 3 opponents ready themselves for the fight, Bucho approaches Tatsuma and whispers that they need to change the plan, suggesting his friend just hold out for 1 minute and then surrender immediately. He explains that this is the only way for Tatsuma to keep his dignity and not get expelled from school. Promising he's going to use all his strength to handle the defense for both of them during that time, Tatsuma thanks his companion and thinks that, even though he was planning on teaching those nobles a severe lesson, now he needs to take it easy, so he doesn't end up ruining Bucho's reputation. With a sigh and a light smile on his face, the prota decides that the move will be to hold back a bit and not use his full strength in the fight. The starting signal is given, and the 3 opponents begin casting powerful elemental spells of fire, ice, and lightning. While Bucho takes the front line, Bucho activates his glowing shield and successfully blocks the massive explosion of spells coming their way, making Tatsuma notice that a B-level defensive paladin is something pretty rare to see. The big guy holds strong against the impact of the magic attack and yells for Tatsuma to stay protected behind him until the time runs out and they can surrender. Except Tatsuma thinks to himself that waiting a whole minute would be a massive waste of time and decides to take action on his own. Using an absurd and unnoticeable burst of speed, the prota charges through the smokescreen and pops up right behind the fire mage before he can even react. With an extremely fast and precise strike to the back of the neck, Tatsuma knocks out the first opponent instantly without him even realizing what happened. Without breaking stride, the young man moves like lightning across the battlefield and floors the second opponent in spectacular fashion. Right after, he leaps toward the third mage and lands a clean strike that sends him straight to the floor, finishing the fight in just a few seconds. The dust begins to settle in the arena, revealing the 3 noble opponents passed out on the ground, while Bucho remains in the exact same defensive stance, completely clueless. Tatsuma calmly walks over to his roommate and gives a light tap on his shoulder to grab his attention. Bucho turns around startled and asks if the fight is already over, receiving a calm, positive reply from the prota. The big guy looks around the massive gym and is completely bewildered to see all their opponents knocked out and defeated on the floor. Benjamin Lee stands in shock, realizing that Tatsuma used the dust cloud to close the distance, defeated the 3 mages in the blink of an eye using only hand-to-hand combat, and backed off without making a single sound. The The professor grinds his teeth in frustration, noticing that the boy's combat technique is extremely solid and that he is highly accustomed to violent street brawls. Tatsuma flashes a casual smile and tells Bucho that their opponents were so desperate to hit them that they ended up losing control of their own magic power. Bucho has a light bulb moment and claps his fist into his hand, happily believing that the noble's spells collided and exploded right back on themselves. To try and cover up his own embarrassment, Professor Benjamin Lee ends the class for the day, ordering the 3 injured to be taken to the infirmary, using their failure as an example of how spell stability is vital in real combat. The noble students who were watching everything start laughing, relieved, convinced that a mere commoner would never beat 3 of them, and that the whole thing was nothing but pure luck. Benjamin Lee approaches Tatsuma with disdain, questioning if he really thinks defeating 3 weak students is enough justification to secure his spot at the university. The professor maliciously warns him that the practical exam in the dungeon will be the very next day, but since no noble will want the boy in their squad, he will be forced to quietly drop out of the course. Tatsuma just smiles with casual mockery and says he's looking forward to the test, calmly passing by the instructor as he prepares to say one more thing. He taunts the instructor, asking if he finally meets his standards of practical results, leaving Professor Benjamin Lee foaming with rage and hoping the young man is indeed ready for the next day. The next day, all the students gather in the outdoor area of the dungeon testing grounds to hear the instructions for the practical exam. Benjamin Lee uses a megaphone to announce before the crowd that, to pass the test, every squad needs to clear the dungeon on normal difficulty or higher, and whoever fails will be summarily expelled from the institution. He explains that, to prevent fatal accidents like the ones that occurred in the entrance exam, students must form squads of at least 3 members, making it mandatory to have at least 1 noble in every team. Tatsuma instantly spots the real intention behind that cowardly rule, understanding that the professor wants to block the commoners from taking the test, since no noble would agree to carry them as dead weight. Right then, Bucho comes running up very excited and calls Tatsuma to join his squad, revealing he already managed to find 2 nobles willing to team up with them. Bucho signals for the 2 noble students to come over to meet their new teammate. The big guy proudly introduces his roommate as an extremely talented swordsman, stating that Tatsuma is perfect to take on the frontline physical combat role they so badly need. However, one of the nobles lets out a mocking laugh upon recognizing the prota and ironically comments on Tatsuma's terrible reputation. The other noble with a sour face adds that Tatsuma allegedly took out 3 nobles during the entrance exam, guaranteeing that nobody in their right mind would agree to team up with a killer like that. Bucho is left completely awkward and confused by the noble's hostile reaction, while the rest of the students around begin to gossip about the guy's presence. Tatsuma realizes immediately that someone has been spreading fake rumors to ruin his reputation, and he is absolutely certain that the culprit behind it is instructor Benjamin Lee himself. He understands the professor's dirty blueprint, intending to use the university's own rules to make sure he gets eliminated and expelled without ever needing to dirty his own hands. Bucho desperately tries to defend his friend, saying it was all just a terrible accident, but Tatsuma just tells him to let it go. Completely ignoring Tatsuma, the arrogant noble addresses Bucho and warns him that he only agrees to squad up with him because a demigod-rank paladin would be highly useful in the dungeon. Bucho stands hesitant and worried about the prejudiced attitude of the 2, not really knowing how to react in front of Tatsuma, who just watches everything in silence. To make matters worse, the insolent noble steps even closer and asks if they remember a rumor about a commoner girl who supposedly took her own life inside that very dungeon. Tatsuma begins to emanate a dark aura of extreme rage as he listens to the noble laugh and call the girl stupid for having the audacity to turn down a lord's invitation. The noble kid keeps telling the grim story with a disgusting smile, revealing that the nobles stripped her down on the 3rd floor of the dungeon before hanging her in a corner. His partner laughs along in agreement and advises Bucho to choose very carefully which side he wants to be on, if he doesn't want to end up meeting the same tragic fate, consumed by hatred upon hearing such cruelty. Tatsuma extends his hand glowing with a bluish energy and coldly asks if that was all they had to say. In a swift and threatening motion, Tatsuma draws his rusty sword and points it directly against the arrogant noble's neck, leaving everyone around in a state of absolute shock. With his eyes glowing a terrifying shade of red, the prota warns with a dark smile that a supposed killer like him has zero fear of punishments, and that they are the ones who should watch out so they don't end up dead furious at the commoner's audacity. The second noble readies a powerful physical focus attack to strike Tatsuma from behind by surprise. He unleashes a violent punch against the boy, yelling for him not to get ahead of himself, but his strike ends up breaking upon colliding against the prota's back. The noble backs off, clutching his injured hand, and asks, startled, why Tatsuma didn't even try to dodge his direct attack. Bucho also watches the scene startled and asks his friend if he's really okay after taking that punch to the back. Tatsuma gives a dark smile of pure satisfaction and comments that the only school rule that banned assault specifically mentioned offensive magic, and that physical punch was all the confirmation he needed. He calmly turns to his opponents and explains that, according to the institution's own rules, purely physical attacks that don't use magic are completely permitted. The noble begins to step back, shaking and terrified, asking what the prota plans to do, while Tatsuma takes an intimidating step in his direction. With insane agility, the commoner swordsman unleashes a spectacular kick that hits the attacker's face dead on. The impact of the kick is so violent that the noble kid is launched far away at high speed across the university courtyard. He collides heavily against a brick wall, which cracks entirely from the force of the impact, making him let out a groan of pain before collapsing to the ground. The other noble in the blue jacket is horrified and ignites flames in his hands, furiously screaming that he won't hold back anymore against a commoner who dares lay hands on nobles. But before he can even launch his fire spell, Tatsuma is way faster and lands a devastating punch straight to his face. The clean strike makes the noble scream in pain as he is sent airborne from the brutal impact. Giving his opponent zero chance to react, Tatsuma drives forward and delivers an extremely sharp knee strike right into the boy's stomach. The opponent spits saliva, his eyes wide open from pure pain due to the overwhelming impact he suffered in his gut. With both opponents completely knocked out and floored on the pavement, the prota remains standing with a cold and imposing stance. Bucho watches that entire terrifying display of power in absolute silence, extremely shocked by his roommate's insane strength. Tatsuma begins to slowly walk with his sword toward the first noble who told the cruel story, who starts crawling back in fear and screams desperately, begging the boy not to come closer, threatening him with his influential father's name. With a frighteningly cold and ruthless look, Tatsuma simply replies that he doesn't give a single flip about who his father is. Realizing the situation is about to spin out of control, Bucho runs over and grabs the prota's shoulder, warning that nobles have powerful connections, and that if Tatsuma beats him now, no noble will agree to form a squad with them for the exam. Tatsuma stops for a moment, looks back with a serious expression, and apologizes to his friend, stating he will take full responsibility for what he did. Bucho yells back, extremely frustrated, reminding the prota that he's not the only commoner in the university and that all of them need to follow the rules if they want to survive in there. He grips Tatsuma's shoulder tightly and adds with regret that his impulsive actions are going to end up making life even harder for all the other commoner students from here on out. Tatsuma lets out a sigh and says he understands the situation. While watching the last noble leave in silence, Bucho laments the situation, worriedly commenting that after that mess, it's highly likely no other noble will want to squad up with them. Tatsuma calms his companion down, saying that he is the only one the nobles are actually avoiding in that place. The prota begins to walk away and advises Bucho not to come near him in public anymore for his own safety, concluding that it really is best for him to go solo. Tatsuma thinks to himself that if everyone around him decided to be his enemy, pulling away is the only way to ensure nobody close to him ends up getting hurt. Bucho runs after him and shouts that Tatsuma is extremely strong for having the courage to do what he himself would never be capable of doing. The big guy keeps going, saying he doesn't want to see his friend facing the music alone for this, reminding him that he had promised to protect him no matter what. He adds that even if Tatsuma doesn't agree with the unfair rules of that game, if he gets eliminated and expelled right now, he will never get the opportunity to try and break them in the future. Tatsuma looks askance with a light smile on his face, admitting he never imagined that Bucho of all people would be the one to manage to bring some sense into his head. Bucho celebrates excitedly and locks his friend in a bear hug, saying that that's the right attitude, and suggesting they head to the dungeon entrance to try and convince anyone to join them. Tatsuma smiles and thinks that, for now, he will need to swallow his pride and follow the rules to manage to pass the exam, form a squad, and continue his path to becoming the strongest of all. Tatsuma and Bucho finally arrive at the location where the entrance to the training dungeon is located. The prota flashes an intrigued smile and comments to himself that this whole situation is getting really interesting. Before them, the dungeon entrance reveals itself as a mystical portal of glowing purple energy carved into the rocks, surrounded by dozens of students waiting for the test to begin. Some nobles start whispering maliciously upon spotting the two partners, identifying them as the insolent commoners who dared beat up Yamasi and his noble crew earlier. The other students quickly start backing away from Tatsuma and Bucho, commenting that it's best to keep their distance so they don't end up getting dragged into serious trouble. Bucho gets pretty discouraged and breaks into a cold sweat upon realizing that even the other commoner students are actively avoiding standing near them. Tatsuma just observes the people's reaction and reflects that the flock of sheep will always hate the wolves, but if someone chooses to remain a sheep forever, in the end, they'll just get eaten anyway. Suddenly, a loud laugh echoes through the place, drawing the attention of both boys as they face the approach of a young man with an imposing posture. The newcomer is a guy with spiky red hair and a sleeveless black outfit who mocks Tatsuma by calling him the Big Star. Everyone among the commoners is talking about the red-haired guy, casually walks toward the Prota and asks if his name really is Tatsuma. Emori Bucho gets very tense and whispers to Tatsuma that that's Shin Hisashi, an A-rank noble assassin who ranked in the top 50 on the entrance exam, but who has a reputation for being cold, calculating, and not popular at all. Shin Hisashi ignores Tatsuma, points straight at Bucho, and invites him to join his squad, stating that his team urgently needs a B-rank tank paladin. The big guy's eyes go wide, and he points to himself in shock, totally surprised to be invited by a noble of such a high rank. Around them, other students begin to whisper, astonished, questioning if the elite assassin completely lost his mind by inviting the best friend of an alleged noble killer. Bucho hesitates and asks if the invitation is just for him, questioning if Tatsuma couldn't join the squad too. Shin Hisashi gives a mocking smile with his arms crossed and dryly replies that they only need a paladin for the team. Without thinking twice, Bucho tightens his fist with determination and turns down the invite on the spot, declaring that Tatsuma is his best friend and that he would never accept leaving him behind. The noble assassin smiles, amused, and taunts Tatsuma, asking if he should take the Prota instead of Bucho, and questioning if the loyalty between the two is truly mutual. Tatsuma just smiles calmly and advises Bucho to take the offer, saying that that's an excellent opportunity for him to do well on the test. Bucho tries to protest, worried about his friend, but Tatsuma reassures him, saying he'll handle things on his own and that, after all, it was his fault their original squad ended up falling apart. Shin Hisashi observes Tatsuma's selfless attitude and starts to wonder if the guy really doesn't care about getting expelled from school once and for all. The moment Tatsuma begins to walk away, Shin Hisashi tells him to hold on and grabs his attention again. The red-haired noble asks, curious, why the Prota didn't beg to join the squad or try to prove he's way better than Bucho to secure his own spot. Tatsuma turns around with a confident smile and replies that it wouldn't make sense to act like that, since he's genuinely happy to see his best friend taking advantage of a good opportunity to move up in life. The Prota then shifts his tone of voice and questions Shin Hisashi about the exact timing of his appearance, finding it extremely fishy that he showed up right when the two commoners were about to be disqualified for a lack of members. Shin Hisashi gives a sheepish smile and scratches his head, casually admitting that Tatsuma is an extremely sharp and observant guy. The assassin decides to lay his cards on the table and confesses to the boys that he managed to secure valuable inside info regarding the dungeon where the test will take place. He reveals that that dungeon has an absurdly high magic resistance, which puts the noble mages, who rely entirely on magic attacks, at an extreme disadvantage. Shin Hisashi steps closer to Tatsuma and explains that physical classes, like the commoners, are the most suited to handle that challenge, and that's why he needs an ally with high physical attack power. The noble adds that if Tatsuma had tried to step over Bucho to steal his friend's spot, he would have retracted the offer on the spot, finding that the guy wouldn't be worthy of fighting by his side. He points at the Prota and smiles, stating he realized from the start that Tatsuma is completely different from all the other fearful commoners at that university. Because of that, Shin Hisashi says he'll make a special exception and allow Tatsuma to enter his combat squad too, mockingly commenting that the guy should be eternally grateful for it. Tatsuma weighs the invitation and comments that an A-rank noble inviting a D-tier commoner who just beat up nobles is something that makes zero logical sense. He reminds him that by putting him in the squad, Shin Hisashi will automatically be making enemies out of all the other influential nobles in the university, something a calculating guy like him should know very well. The Prota stares down the red-haired assassin in an intimidating way and demands he lay out a real, convincing reason for making such a risky proposal. Shin Hisashi tries to dodge the question with a smirk, claiming he just wanted to give the guy a fighting chance at survival and asking if there's anything wrong with that. Tatsuma displays a scoffing smile and says he's going to guess the real reason behind that sudden noble generosity. He reveals that the official exam rule requires nobles to also form mixed squads with commoners, and concludes that, in reality, Shin Hisashi was also rejected by all the other nobles and has nobody to team up with. Tatsuma explains that the true hidden meaning behind this rule is that the nobles, who are focused solely on magic, simply can't pass the test without the help of commoners focused on physical combat. The prota deduces that the rule was created solely to use commoners as meat shields to protect the nobles, this being the reason every squad is forced to have at least one commoner as a physical combatant. He looks intently at Shin Hisashi and states that because he is extremely unpopular even among the nobles themselves, nobody from his social class agreed to form a team with him. Tatsuma points to the other terrified commoners around and concludes that given that tight spot, the red-haired assassin simply ran out of choices. He gives a smirk and states that at the end of the day, the one who most desperately needs to form a squad, there isn't him, but Shin Hisashi himself. Completely panicked by the revelation, the red-haired noble gestures frantically, telling Tatsuma to shut his mouth and not talk so loud so the others won't hear. Shin Hisashi whispers textbook humblingly into the prota's ear, begging for his discretion and saying his reputation would be ruined if everyone knew he was rejected by commoners. The assassin tries to laugh off the embarrassment and argues with a nervous smile that at the end of the day, Tatsuma doesn't have any other option to manage to take the test either. The prota looks thoughtfully at the noble's extended hand, waiting for an answer. Tatsuma accepts Shin Hisashi's handshake and agrees that that deal is fair enough for both sides. The red-haired noble suggests they lock in the squad right away, leaving Bucho completely surprised to realize the three of them are actually going to fight together. Shin Hisashi takes the trio's leadership in an authoritative way and demands to be obeyed inside the dungeon, while Bucho begrudgingly accepts and Tatsuma coldly warns he can't promise any such obedience. Watching the scene from afar with deep hatred, Professor Benjamin Lee curses Shin Hisashi for messing up his revenge plans by teaming up with two insolent commoners. The corrupt instructor adjusts his glasses and displays a devilish smile, wondering if Tatsuma really believes that merely forming a squad will be enough to save his life. Benjamin Lee sardonically reflects that, unexpected, fatal accidents happen with way more frequency in the pitch-black depths of the dungeon than within the safe boundaries of the university. He delights himself imagining the terrible scene of the prota, severely injured and broken alongside his lifeless companions, promising he'll watch from the front row as they all meet a pathetic end. Oblivious to the professor's dark thoughts, the newly formed trio walks toward the mystical portal of the training dungeon. Bucho approaches the prota with a serious expression and calls Tatsuma's name as they walk. Benjamin Lee suddenly pops up in the boy's path and mockingly comments that Tatsuma got very lucky to find nobles willing to team up with him. The prota doesn't flinch and directly asks what excuse the professor is going to cook up this time to try and get in his way. The instructor maintains his cynical smile and replies that by school rules, Tatsuma secured the necessary qualifications, so he has no reason to stop him from entering the dungeon. With an extremely threatening gaze, Benjamin Lee advises the young man to walk with his head down in there, because nobody will be able to save him if a deadly curveball comes his way. Bucho gets furious at the professor's veiled threats and tries to demand answers, but Tatsuma extends his arm to calm his friend down and tells him not to sweat it. The prota displays a challenging smile and fires back at the professor, saying his only real concern is that the dungeon might be too easy and end up leaving him bored. The corrupt instructor grinds his teeth out of pure rage facing such utter audacity and insolence from the young commoner. Trying to contain his fury, Benjamin Lee hands the dungeon portal key to Shin Hisashi, stating that as the leader, he must be responsible for it. The red-haired assassin examines the object with confusion, noticing he received an obsidian key, questioning why he didn't get the regular mithril key given to all the other students. The professor cooks up a blatant lie, saying all the keys were changed at the last minute and asking in a taunting tone if the young leader is afraid to use it. Benjamin Lee flashes a triumphant smile behind the boys' backs, knowing that that key actually opens the portal to the cursed dungeon, whose difficulty level is infinitely superior to anything any rookie would be capable of handling. The wicked instructor watches the trio walk away and silently celebrates having found the perfect trap to make Tatsuma and his friends disappear from this world forever. Shin Hisashi raises the obsidian key toward the massive portal of glowing purple energy and announces it's time to kick off the practical exam. As soon as they cross the portal, the three run into the interior of a dark and eerie cave filled with chained coffins hanging from the ceiling, and the squad leader begins dictating the combat formation. Shin Hisashi determines that Bucho will be the frontline shield, while he himself provides cover, attacking from the rear, preparing to give the orders to Tatsuma. However, Tatsuma completely ignores the leader's orders and begins walking alone into the dungeon interior, leaving the red-haired noble frantic and yelling about the danger of that place. Worried about his friend's safety, Bucho instantly summons his glowing light shield and charges ahead to protect him. The paladin runs desperate, begging Tatsuma to come back and follow the leader's instructions, while Shin Hisashi yells annoyed at the swordsman's total lack of discipline. In the heat of the moment, Bucho ends up misstepping onto a stone tile on the floor, which makes a worrying click and sends him into instant panic. Tatsuma's eyes go wide as he senses the imminent danger and yells, warning that the two of them just triggered a deadly dungeon trap. Suddenly, a massive horde of spiders with glowing red eyes begins rapidly descending from the ceiling. Toward the boys, Bucho hits total despair and throws himself to the ground with his eyes squeezed shut, whimpering that he is deathly afraid of any creature that has more than 4 legs. Shin Hisashi quickly draws his twin daggers and triggers his fire magic to coat the blades in intense flames, ordering the commoners to stay back if they can't fight. The assassin charges against the creatures, unleashing a huge explosion of fire, and confidently comments that the spiders are extremely vulnerable to heat and will be easy to defeat. He displays an arrogant smile amid the flames, mocking the commoners for being so afraid of mere dungeon bugs. However, the noble's smile completely vanishes as he looks back and sees Tatsuma casually walking right through the monster horde without a single spider daring to attack him. In fact, the monsters look totally confused and even back away startled from the prota's path as he advances without any rush. Shin Hisashi's jaw drops, completely unable to wrap his head around what is happening right before his eyes with that bizarre spider reaction. He begins reasoning out the monster's behavior and remembers that those spiders locate their prey solely through the detection of magic energy. The noble realizes Tatsuma didn't use any magic and deduces with astonishment that the spiders are confused because the prota simply possesses absolutely zero magic energy in his body. In his memories of the day he awakened his class, the prota remembers making the vow to sacrifice his entire talent for magic in exchange for focusing solely on the physical power of his sword. The system panel confirms that the boy's hidden passive skill keeps his magic energy permanently at 0, causing his physical techniques to consume only his stamina instead of magic. Shin Hisashi reasons that by completely discarding magic to focus on a purely physical class, Tatsuma theoretically can become infinitely stronger by training only his body. However, he remembers that a person with 0 magic energy will never be able to hit a class evolution, concluding that the prota is a totally unpredictable individual. The noble slaps Bucho on the head to wake him from his trance and yells, telling the big guy to quickly snap out of it. Bucho gets up reeling and yells that he's great and that he'll protect Tatsuma no matter what, while the prota just smirks right behind him. The boys look around and notice that all the spiders have vanished from the dark cave, leaving the environment in a tense silence. The big paladin gets confused and comments that the monsters didn't seem to have any actual intention of attacking them. He wonders if those creatures weren't enemies and tries to figure out what the true purpose was behind that weird trap. Tatsuma explains that if his theory is right, the spider invasion was just the mechanism needed to trigger the true danger of that dungeon. Suddenly, a giant stone sarcophagus wrapped in chains and eerie purple flames begins to slowly lower from the cave ceiling. The massive tomb crashes against the floor with a deafening thud, shattering all the chains and magic seals that held it. The door slides open, revealing a colossal skeleton warrior wielding a giant sword, identified by the system as Kalis, the Death Rejector. A level 5 cursed elite monster. Shin Hisashi panics upon recognizing a level 5 elite monster, frantically explaining that that's an extremely rare hidden boss to encounter. The assassin grinds his teeth out of pure rage, realizing that Professor Benjamin Lee gave them that cursed key on purpose to eliminate them, horrified to see that the instructor didn't hesitate to put even a noble's life like his at risk. Bucho asks shakily if the creature is strong, and Shin Hisashi replies terrified that it is incomparably more powerful than any other regular level 5 monster. He adds that even a full squad of 5 well-prepared level 7 warriors would have an immense struggle just to manage to survive against that terrible monster. The red-haired noble despairs, noticing that a disorganized level 3 squad like them stands zero chance, lamenting their awful luck of catching a one-way ticket straight to a bad end. The terrifying skeleton, Kalis, begins to move slowly and declares with a hollow voice that demise awaits all invaders of that sanctuary. Shin Hisashi hits total panic and yells for his squadmates to take the chance to scatter and run for their lives. But to the noble assassin's surprise, Tatsuma simply ignores the escape warning and charges at high speed right toward the giant monster. The prota displays a wild smile and thinks that the creature is the absolutely perfect opponent to make him push his limits and get even stronger. Tatsuma draws his sword and runs straight into a clash with the terrifying dungeon boss. The colossal skeleton warrior raises its sword wrapped in purple flames to unleash a crushing blow against the young intruder. In that moment, an intense and powerful red battle aura completely envelops Tatsuma's body, reigniting his entire fighting spirit. He plants himself firmly in the face of danger, causing gusts of wind and elemental energy to swirl violently around him. Shin Hisashi screams from afar, asking if the guy completely lost his marbles, and vows he won't let himself get dragged down to a bad end because of someone else's stupidity. Bucho watches his friend astonished and asks the assassin if he also saw Tatsuma's body catch fire with that terrifying red energy. The paladin realizes that contrary to what they imagined, the prota actually envisioned a real way to win that impossible clash. Bucho decides he's not going to let his companion fight alone and charges into battle, leaving Shin Hisashi even more stunned by the commoner's madness. Tatsuma coldly analyzes the giant skeleton's movements, planning to let the monster attack a few times so he can observe its strike pattern and adapt. Except Bucho suddenly pops up in front of the prota, activating his energy shield, leaving Tatsuma annoyed at having his strategy messed up at the last second. The young swordsman yells, telling his friend to stop, but the big guy ignores the warning and charges ahead, unleashing a violent rush with his light shield. Bucho roars with determination, keeping in mind that a tank paladin's duty at the start of every fight is to march straight to the front line to absorb damage. He crashes against the colossal monster in an attempt to create an opening for Tatsuma to manage to land a clean strike from behind. However, the terrible skeleton warrior doesn't even budge from the shield's impact and locks its eyes on the paladin, its purple sockets glowing in a threatening way. With a single devastating sweep of its giant sword, Kalis shatters Bucho's light shield into 1,000 pieces all at once. The force of the impact is so absurd that the poor paladin is sent flying through the air while letting out a cry of despair. In a ruthless move, the skeleton boss delivers a violent kick against the boy's body while he's still airborne, launching him against the stone wall. Bucho hits the rocks, coughing up blood, and falls completely unconscious onto the cold cave floor. Shin Hisashi shakes from fear seeing a B-rank paladin get knocked out by just a simple regular hit, realizing anyone else would have perished on the spot and deciding he is not going to fight a monster like that. The cowardly noble pulls a U-turn and starts fleeing, saying that if those two idiots want to perish there, he's leaving alone to save his own skin. However, a loud metallic clash echoes through the cave as Tatsuma uses his old rusty sword to block Kailas's crushing attack. The prota holds firm against the immense physical pressure exerted by the elite monster's giant blade, digging his feet into the cracked dungeon floor. The colossal skeleton glares at the young commoner with irritation in its bony jaw, muttering that he is an insolent being for daring to resist its power. Tatsuma stares right back with extreme seriousness and declares that from that moment on, he will be its one and only opponent in there. Shin Hisashi freezes his escape in shock upon seeing the swordsman resisting the monster and wonders if he really plans to take it on completely solo until the end. While Kalis tries to crush the prota, the red-haired assassin bites his lip out of pure jealousy, believing Tatsuma pretended to be weak from the start just to steal all the glory of the battle for himself. Making a tremendous effort to hold the monster back, Tatsuma yells, ordering the noble to focus on keeping the creature's attention turned toward him. Shin Hisashi refuses to be overshadowed by a commoner and leaps toward the monster, activating his fire magic on his daggers, screaming that his reputation as a noble leader would be destroyed if he stayed out of the fight. He attacks the skeleton's back by surprise with all his might, determined not to let Tatsuma take all the credit for the victory of that practical exam. However, to the red-haired noble's despair, the system displays that his strike dealt 0 damage, revealing that Kalis possesses an absurdly impenetrable magic defense. Tatsuma notices the situation is getting extremely dangerous because his original blueprint to counterattack is starting to fall apart. Suddenly, the skeleton Kalis extends its free arm and snatches Shin Hisashi right out of the air, leaving the red-haired noble desperate and screaming to be let go immediately. The Prota realizes that that's the perfect opportunity to strike. Since the creature got distracted and pulled all the attention that was focused on him, Shin Hisashi lets out a scream of panic, unable to understand what's happening, as he sees the skeleton prepare to attack him directly. Capitalizing on the opening, Tatsuma leaps with everything he's got and unleashes an extremely powerful slash with his sword toward the monster. The strike is so brutal that it tears the skeleton warrior's arm clean off, leaving Shin Hisashi falling to the ground in a state of absolute shock as he watches the monster's limb get severed. The noble falls on his back onto the floor, while Tatsuma sticks a firm landing right next to the skeletal arm that was sliced off. Shin Hisashi props himself up on the ground, groaning in pain, trying to recover from the impact of the violent fall. He watches Tatsuma trade rapid blows against the dungeon boss and realizes that what he saw earlier was no illusion of his mind. The noble reflects astonished that even by using his full power as an assassin, he couldn't deal a single point of damage to the creature, while Tatsuma managed to rip the monster's arm off with a single strike using that old sword. The skeleton warrior unleashes a devastating horizontal slash, but the Prota is extremely agile and manages to dodge the attack. By ducking right under the blade, Kalis attacks again from top to bottom with fury, forcing Tatsuma to take a quick leap back so he doesn't get crushed by the blow. Shin Hisashi is forced to retreat in a hurry to escape the massive shockwave generated by the deadly combat. The noble complains furiously, asking why he's getting clipped by the attacks if the creature is supposed to be focused solely on the Prota, receiving a sharp warning from Tatsuma to get out of the way if he doesn't want to be deadweight. Shin Hisashi fumes with anger at being called deadweight and makes up that he just slipped, yelling at the commoner not to get cocky just because of his strength. However, seeing Tatsuma block yet another devastating attack from the colossal monster, the noble is forced to admit to himself that the Prota's class is far from being trash and that Tatsuma is undeniably strong.